next, we're going to hear from Sarah Anderson from the Institute for Policy Studies. So Sarah and her team at IPS have taken the lead on starting a draft of a white paper that this conference will culminate with. So Sarah's going to walk us through a quick overview of where we stand in creating our vision for the future of the Postal Service and how this conference fits in.
Hey everybody, thank you, Erica. Yeah, I see my job here today is really sparking your imagination by sharing some of these initial thoughts about what a people's postal agenda could look like. And I'm going to share a slideshow about that. So just let me get that set up. But yeah, it's been so exciting to be able to shift from being in defense mode for several years, helping to defend the public postal service from all of these attacks, and being able to shift now to being proactive and positive and think about all the exciting things we could do with this incredible national treasure. I think we've been calling the Postal Service today. So before I get into the specific ideas about where we might go, I wanted to remind you first that the Postal Service has long been a driver of innovation. So in 1897, they introduced rural free delivery. This helped knit rural and urban communities together and expanded markets, benefiting the broader economy. In 1913, they introduced Parcel Post. So they started delivering packages, and that created the mail order catalog industry and laid the foundation for today's e-commerce. In 1918, they introduced airmail service. So that sped up deliveries and then also benefited the broader economy by laying the foundation for the commercial aviation industry. So there's a long, rich history of innovation in the Postal Service. And what we want you to do this week is think hard about where we want to go in the 21st century. I also have family history in the Postal Service. My grandfather actually started delivering the mail on horseback in North Dakota. And I think about that and I'm amazed at all the Postal Service has achieved and all the innovations they've made since that time. And I think the goal for us in these next 3 days is to think about what we want the Postal Service to look like in 5, 10, or 20 years from now. So we'll be able to look back and be similarly amazed by how far we've come since 2021. So what are some of the ideas out there about how the Postal Service could expand in ways to even more strongly meet the needs of our today's society? Well, one idea that has a lot of energy, and we'll be devoting tomorrow to this, is expanding financial services. So low income and especially low income communities of color don't have to rely on predatory financial firms. Another area where there's a lot of interest is looking at how the Postal Service could be a key driver of the shift to a clean, renewable energy economy. So there's a lot of talk these days about replacing the vehicle fleet with electric vehicles. We could also have more solar panels installed on post offices. We could have charging stations at post offices. And while I'm on the trucks, there's also very creative ideas about putting monitors on these trucks to monitor indicators of community safety and government services, from potholes to pollution. They could be gathering data about these and transmitting it back to governments to make our communities safer and governments more effective. We could also think about what role the Postal Service might play in the strength and care infrastructure that we know we so badly need in this country. The Postal Service can't do everything, obviously, but they could play a role here. And this is an image from a program in France where postal workers have a system where they check in on the elderly and the disabled. They ask them questions about their welfare, and then they transmit that information to family members and caregivers and social service agencies. It's a way to help people continue to live independently at home. Our democracy, boy, did we get a lesson over the past year, and what a vital role the Postal Service plays in protecting our democracy in a pandemic, but but in other times as well to help counter racist voter suppression. And so there are a lot of ideas on how we can build on the incredible job the Postal Service did last year with vote by mail to expand that nationwide. We also got a really tough lesson last year about the digital divide and how wide that is still in the richest country in the world. So what do you think? Could the Postal Service, with its vast network across the country, help anchor an initiative to eliminate the digital divide, especially in underserved rural communities? We've been talking about how the Postal Service has for so long been a provider of decent jobs with benefits. I think a critical part of a people's postal agenda will be to ensure that all postal workers have good benefits and security and the right to collective bargaining. It's especially important for Black workers who make up nearly 25% of the postal workforce. Protecting public health. Wow, we really got an eye-opener over the past year in what a vital role the Postal Service played in helping people socially distance by staying at home instead of going shopping as much in stores. What about the coming crises? Could the Postal Service play an even more strategic role? Could they help out with contact tracing, for example? Or what about having post offices become community wellness centers where you could go to get your blood pressure checked and get information about different kinds of health programs that are available to you? Another big thing that happened over the last year is that Americans became even more dependent on e-commerce, and that is probably going to continue. So I think, again, a part of the people's postal agenda needs to be to make sure that our Postal Service maintains its universal service obligation, delivering affordable, reliable service no matter where people live. Finally, what about small farmers and people who need easier access to healthy food? Could the Postal Service play a role in that? We're going to hear some more specific ideas about that from one of our other panelists. So those are some of the ideas in the discussion paper that we prepared for this conference. You should have a link to it in your registration materials. And here's what you can do to be a part of this process. One thing is you can review that full paper, and over the next few days, we want to hear your thoughts about it. What about these ideas excites you? What do you think is not that exciting? What's missing altogether? How can we really strengthen this people's postal agenda in ways that will be really exciting and inspiring to people across the country? We're going to be taking really careful notes in the breakout sessions and from the chat box too. There's already been some good ideas in the chat box, and we're going to be working to incorporate those new ideas to make that paper a lot better. If you'd also like to submit some written comments, you can send them to my colleague Brian at this address, and this address is also on the last page of the paper, so you don't have to rush to write it down right now, and try to do that over the next couple of weeks. You'll also want to make sure that you're staying connected, so you can sign up for news about this process and alerts about it through the info@grandalliance.org. And then what the idea is we're going to take all this input, we're going to strengthen this people's postal agenda, and we'll be helping to organize a launch event and then starting to organize collectively around this agenda. There are so many people who are excited to see this paper. There are members of Congress, there are officials in the Biden administration who know that this conference is happening this week, are so excited to see the agenda that we're going to produce out of it, because we all share the common goal of building on all the innovation over the past centuries in ways that can ensure that the public postal service continues to serve all American people for many generations to come. Thank you.
And thank you, Sarah. That was really inspirational. It's great to be thinking about the future, as you said, to no longer be on the defense and be looking at how we can move forward. So we're going to jump right into our next panel, but not to worry, we will have time for questions for all of our panelists at the end. So Our next panel features two speakers who can give us some examples of new and interesting ways to use the postal network to better serve our community, some of the things that Sarah was just talking about. So first up is Kerr. Kerr is the founder and host of the Postal Hub Podcast and a well-known commentator and analyst on global postal and delivery trends. He's also one half of the Last Mile Prophets of producing videos and webinars focusing on the last mile. Then following Ian, we'll have Julia Kurnik from the World Wildlife Foundation. The WWF USA recently published this interesting business case for what they're calling Farmers Post, I think what Sarah was just referencing. And that's a way to get fresh fruits and vegetables to your doorstep in no time with the Postal Service. So Ian, you're up first. Please take it away.
Hello, everybody, and I apologize for my lack of slides. I thought I'd just give you the glorious experience of just being part of this with me, one too many as we are today. I guess I wanted to focus on some positive things today, to talk about some of the opportunities that are out there for the post office in the USA and what we can look at from around the world. As we've heard everybody say so far, the Post has an undeniable social role, whether it's being a hub in a community through a post office or through reaching out to people via the delivery networks. And that is important when we look at the opportunities that are out there in the postal world. So things that we can do to enhance what we currently do in the postal in the postal business. I know I've used the word business and that might be a little bit verboten in this discussion, but let's just think about it that way in terms of being a business or a social business, perhaps is another way of putting it. I also just want to mention that the Post does have an important role for the digitally disadvantaged. Maybe we're going to get to that in the panel, but let's just talk about some really big key concepts here. To be a world-class post, you need to have the best people, you need to have the best network, and I mean both post offices and last mile network, and that has to be backed up by the best tech. That's a key thing in the 21st century. We can't rely on the emotion that people feel for us, that feel for our networks, for our people. We need to also have that backed up with the best tech. And that's it was just mentioned in that previous presentation about e-commerce. I'd like to quickly talk about e-commerce. The Post has a reach that the other carriers admire. And I think that's been laid out quite clearly by one of the earlier speakers talking about it from an economical perspective. That is an advantage that needs to be leveraged properly by every single postal operator in the world. By it's using its ability to reach out to the smallest eBay seller through to the biggest e-commerce behemoth. Now let's put the behemoths to one side because they can look after themselves. But there's a great role to be played for those small e-commerce sellers, those small businesses, whether eBay sellers, local producers. They have an easy place to lodge. What I mean by that is they can drop their parcels off at the post office, but we need to have the best tech, right? This comes back to the tech. If you don't have the technology at the post office counter to be able to quickly accept parcels, to be able to do that initial lodgement scan, these are crucial things in modern e-commerce, and we need to be delivering that at a very high quality. Pricing comes into this as well, but maybe we'll come back to that later, because otherwise we'll disappear down a rabbit hole and never surface again. Government and identity services. Now, we have been talking about government and identity services in post offices since Adam was a boy. Now, I'm tired of talking about it, I've got to say, but the opportunity is still there because the message hasn't necessarily got through to every single government in the world. Already we see that post offices around the world are offering things like passport applications, passport renewals, driver's licenses, security checks. So it might be whether it's in Australia, we have working with children checks. There might be other kinds of identity checks that can be done at the post office. You have a great network. It's a trusted network. And this is another key thing. The trusted aspect of the post office network is the envy of every other network out there. The only other network that could possibly come close, I suppose, might be the pharmacists, perhaps. But are they out there in the numbers and with the strength of the common network that the post office has? So government and identity services are a key thing that needs to be looked at. Another one is the role of post offices when it comes to the pickup and lodgement of parcels. Now, I'm not talking about by an e-commerce seller. I'm talking about those end recipients. So when you're checking out from your favorite e-commerce website, what options do you have at the moment? You have home delivery. You may have parcel locker delivery, but what about delivery direct to the post office? The post office is a secure network for parcels. I laugh when I hear about other networks trying to say, oh, we're a PUDO network. PUDO means pick up, drop off, or an access point. I'm sorry, it's probably more of a US term. But are any of them set up for parcels? No, they're not. But the post office network is. So we need to take full advantage of that. And again, this comes back to the tech. All right. So the tech enables the post office to be that pick up, drop off point. A question that I'd pose to everybody here today is this: should the post office only be a delivery point for parcels that originate within the US Postal Service? Or could it be a delivery point for parcels from other carriers? Could FedEx or UPS drop off parcels at the post office for collection? Of course, the Postal Service gets a fee for it, but could it work? I'm not going to say yay or nay on that one, but I'll be interested to hear people's perspective. Let's move away from the post office now to the delivery network. Again, the post office has, the US Postal Service has the best delivery network in the USA. Right now, I'm not just saying that because I'm a guest here. Okay, partially, maybe I am. But in all seriousness, who else delivers to every address in the country? It's the same story in every other postal network in the world. Who else does it? It's a strength, but if that strength is not leveraged, you run the risk of becoming the deliverer of last resort. And that is not a situation you want to find yourself in. Because, well, for various reasons. I've only got 8 minutes, and I'm told that Erica will just cut me off brutally if I go over time. Oh, you laugh, Erica. You can laugh. I know the truth. So a few key things here. Number one, ensuring the quality of letters. Letter volumes are not likely to grow, but if the quality of the letter service declines, in other words, the ability to deliver on time as promised, if that quality declines, then letter volumes will surely follow. That is a crucial thing. This is about being able to meet that delivery promise, right? Whatever that delivery promise might be. Second key point when it comes to delivery is having the best in class interactive delivery management, or IDM. Think of it like Uber for your parcel. How much visibility do we give our customers over their parcels when they're being delivered by the US Postal Service? Does the recipient know when the parcel is going to be delivered? Can they change their mind while the parcel is in the delivery van? Can they choose a delivery window? Can they rate their delivery driver? These are all things that we in the postal sector need to embrace because our competitors are doing it. And we want to make sure that those e-commerce shoppers choose the US Postal Service, choose it, not find themselves defaulted to it, if you can use default as a verb, but we want them to actually choose it because we want the US Postal Service to be the best. So it comes back to those first 3 points: best people, best network, post office and delivery, best tech. All right. Returns are another part of this. So how can the US Postal Service become the leader in returns? And not by default, not just because it's there, but making the best use of that network. Another idea for last mile delivery is, of course, value added services. I heard mentioned that previous presentation about what's it called, interacting with smart cities and monitoring potholes and broken windows and things like that through putting sensors inside of delivery vehicles. Well, how about actually use the person when they're at the doorstep doing a delivery, saying, what did you think of your delivery experience today when you shopped with Acme Flowers or whatever it is, right? Use that point of contact, because this is something the US Postal Service has that the e-commerce retailers don't. So you can use that strength to help your customers, in this case, the customers being the e-commerce retailers. Same day delivery gets talked about a lot. It's perhaps a niche service, but again, why can't the US Postal Service do that when it comes to creating excellence in delivery? So again, it comes back to the tech, comes back to having the resources available as well, and buy-in from every level, from management through to the worker. Everybody has to be committed to that. Just on that, and Erica, I must be running real close to running out of time now, so I'll just make one last point, and that is about sophisticated delivery options. So how can the US Postal Service, taking advantage of its excellent network and its excellent people, also find innovative ways to deliver? I mentioned time slot delivery. I mentioned predicting delivery. Same day delivery is an example. Can we do in-home delivery? Who would you trust more than your postman to deliver inside your house? Can we do all kinds of other delivery options that are out there right now? So those are just a few thoughts, I guess, to spark debate. And I'll have a look through the comments over there. Well, they're over there on my screen. They might be over there on your screen. But I'll have a look through the comments soon and see if anybody's got any comments. I'll try and respond to them. And I know, Erica, we're going to have a panel discussion soon. So I'm bracing myself for that. Erica, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian. And, we were able to make up some time from some earlier panels. So, you haven't taken us over and your safety is secure. Welcome.
Rats.
Yes. But so thank you for that. And we're going to move on now to Julia Kurnik from the World Wildlife Foundation.
Hello. Thank you. I'm just going to share some slides here. So I am Julia Kurnik. I'm Director of Innovation Startups at the World Wildlife Fund. I realize it's a little bit strange to hear that I'm presenting at this, but I am on a team that really looks at major issues and trends that are facing the food, agriculture, and soft commodity worlds. And then my specific role in that is to look for new business models and new business strategies that are not only environmentally sustainable and socially impactful, but also financially profitable so that they can really scale and grow beyond us and take hold. And I am very excited to be here and to talk to you a little bit about Farmers Post, which I do believe could be one of those solutions and was kindly previewed a little bit by Sarah a couple presentations ago. So the idea for this really came up last spring when I was experiencing and watching probably the same issues that pretty much all of you were. So I work with a lot of farmers, and what I was hearing from them and was in the news at the time was how quickly markets pivoted and how much food was getting wasted. Farmers who were selling to restaurants, to schools, to institutions really had their markets ripped away overnight. So food was being left in fields, it was being plowed back under, and it was just left to rot. But while this was happening, grocery store shelves were bare. We were really seeing how broken our food supply chain is in this country. So consumers were staying home, they weren't going to restaurants, we were, worried about safety and going out. But even for those who could afford food, finding it was a difficulty. And certainly the ranks of people who cannot afford food were growing quickly at the time as well. All of this was happening while there were a lot of headlines at the time about how the Postal Service was facing a revenue shortfall and sort of looming fiscal year deadlines around that. And so I began to ponder, is there a way to be a win for all of these groups and to use the post office to get food directly from farmers to consumers? And I think Farmers Post is one solution here that might help address some of these hurdles. So at a very basic level, it would be using the expertise and national distribution network, especially around that last mile distribution that so many of you have talked about, to get food straight from farmers to local consumers. There would have to be some type of virtual aggregator or web portal of some sort so that all of you as consumers could go, put in your zip code, see the farms, and place all the orders right on that one site. This also means that on the farming side, each farm doesn't have to come up with their own website. They don't have to figure out how to take online orders. They don't have to market to consumers on their own. All of that is built into one platform and one sort of overarching aggregator here. That could also be then linked into the post office web and sort of data, getting back at some of the tech points as well, so that when a consumer places an order, the farmer is not only getting the order, but getting the label that can go on a standardized box. The pickup could be scheduled as well for the farmers, so they don't have to go online and do that on their own. So making use of all services that already exist, but trying to streamline it and put it more on the back end as opposed to individual farmers and consumers having to do that. To get into a little bit of the nitty gritty there, because I'm sure this is the audience that would appreciate that. This is not a change of behavior really for anyone involved. It's based off of the regional rate system that already exists and focusing specifically on delivering in zones 1 and 2. There's no cold chain involved. I know that question will come up since it doesn't already exist. So we're not, advocating shipping milk and meat anytime soon, but focusing on produce, vegetables, fruits, possibly nuts that can make it 24 hours without cold chain. And that's a lot of the reason for the zones 1 and 2 as well. So the post office already delivers with the regional rate system within 24 hours for zones 1 and 2, which is a pretty large area. If you put in your zip code and see what that entails, it's more than you would want for what would be a really local and regional food system. There would have to be an additional box size or 2 that would be specific to Farmers Post, because the original box sizes right now in that system all have one dimension that's too narrow for fresh produce. And then I think that every door direct mail would also be a great tool here for marketing and possibly even sign up for people who don't have access or are not comfortable getting online to order. This is a potentially very large market. In the last year, people have really changed how they go about ordering food. We've heard that about e-commerce in general, but it has certainly been true of food in the past year with COVID. You can see a graph here of some of the major delivery options, which none are truly national and do not, exist absolutely everywhere. And while if you look quickly, the lines might look like they are not increasing. It is a percent change map. And so even those steady lines across are showing, 50, 100 or more percent change in the past year. And experts expect this to last. So people are comfortable ordering now. They have established habits. They like cooking at home. They're more used to it. While it might not be at the same numbers it is now, people don't think it will go back to where it was before either. And this has a chance to be a truly national program. So there are vegetable farms, as you can see here, really across almost all of the country, especially because it doesn't have to be in just your county. It just has to be in zones 1 and 2. We tend to think of California as the breadbasket because it is for commercial farms. But when you're talking about local regional food systems, you don't need those massive commercial farms. What's exciting about this is it means this could also be a program that reaches all consumers. A lot of the major delivery options right now only serve urban areas or higher income areas. This has a chance to reach all areas and areas that otherwise don't have access to food. And we really believe it could be a win for all the players involved. So on the post office side, it's increased revenues. We put out a business case, which Erica kindly mentioned a few weeks ago, and it forecasted at a very small uptake, about 1.5 billion annually, up to around 6 billion annually with about 10% uptake. It is a branding opportunity. So, delivering food for all with Farmers Post, a chance to co-brand, to work together and to be the face of that. And it's just a chance to recenter the post office as a center of communities, which I think is a point that came up in some of the comments already as well in the chat. You could even have farmers markets at the post office as a kickoff event to build awareness and allow people to sign up. It's certainly a win for consumers. It's a chance to get fresh, healthy produce direct to your door. And seeing that map that it's something that it could be accessible to everyone. The post office already has rates that are far more affordable than at existing levels without having to even lower them, at a far more affordable than current delivery food services that often add, 35% or more on top for things like Instacart. And if you have a virtual aggregator and you did pilot something like this and it worked, it has the ability to go national almost immediately because the USPS already goes to nearly every door every day. And it's a chance to be safe if you are, immunocompromised or otherwise cannot get to a grocery store. It's a win for farmers. It's more revenue for them and an ability to reach new customers. so that they are not trying to figure out how to market and reach different new consumer groups. It also is not just for farmers who are even selling direct to consumer, but brings the certainty for those who are selling elsewhere. So if they're selling to restaurants or groceries and those change in the future, and those contracts come after growing seasons start, they can now easily sell that surplus to the local community, and it links them into that community. And of course, since I'm here from World Wildlife Fund, it is a win for the environment. We waste 2 to 50% of our specialty crops even before COVID. We believe those rates have gone up, which is incredibly scary when you think of how many hungry people, environmental footprint. And it does this using an existing asset, USPS, so you're not adding emissions elsewhere. This is very much a conversation starter. There's a long way to go, but there's been excitingly a lot of enthusiasm so far. So I have a series of questions here of some of the ones we want to answer and we think are the next steps and questions to answer. And I'm hoping that all of you here can be a part of that. My email is right here, so feel free to reach out. I will also be sticking around for the brainstorming sessions and really look forward to talking about it more and hearing all of your insight and advice. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. I saw in the chat as you were speaking, Kimberly Carroll mentioning using a similar service as I have, and I'm like, wow, I so much prefer to get my ugly fruits from the Postal Service than this is just exciting to hear. So thank you, and thank you, Ian, for your great presentation and information around tech. So as promised, we now have some time for questions from all of you. And remember, if you have a question, it's best to identify yourself by hitting the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. But if you can't find that, you can also literally just raise your hand on the screen or call on yourself in the chat. Then we'll call on you, ask you to unmute yourself, and then you can direct your question to one of our speakers. So we have our speakers up now so that you can see their names. And we have a question. Our first question is from Deb Klein with Cleveland Jobs with Justice. Go ahead, Deb.
Thank you, Erica. Julia, I have a question. You said that you saw this program servicing urban areas. Do you anticipate any pushback from existing urban farm markets and high-end grocery stores?
Thank you, Deborah, and for the question. So we certainly see it serving urban areas, but we see it serving all areas, so not exclusive to urban areas. I think it's possible there are a few pushbacks from farmers markets, but I don't think it will be tremendous because I think it is complementary rather than competing. There's a lot of people who will still absolutely want to go to farmers markets. I know I love getting to go and pick out fruit and look at it, have that, face-to-face discussion with farmers. I think a lot of the people who do that will continue to do that, but this will allow the market to expand for people who either don't have a farmer's market towards them, or the time's inconvenient, or they simply can't get there. So my guess is it grows the total market quite a bit rather than taking people who are already going to a farmer's market away from them.
Thank you, Julia. We have another question from Stephanie Apolland from the Save the USPS Coalition.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie. I'm the Save the Post Office coordinator at Take on Wall Street. We come to this table with an interest in advancing postal banking here in the United States. We'll be discussing more about postal banking tomorrow, but I had a question for Ian that seemed to fit your presentation. We know that many postal services around the world provide significantly more financial services than we do here in the US. So is there any way in which postal financial services helps post offices leverage their network advantages in the parcel networks? It seems to me that a person might be more inclined to have a package shipped through the post office if you're also paying through the post office or being reimbursed for a return at the post office.
Not sure there's any conclusive data about whether or not postal banking has any impact on the usage of other postal services such as e-commerce. I know that there have been very few posts that have taken on postal banking in the last 20 years. In fact, a number of examples of postal banking around the world have actually been reducing their networks. So it's not an easy question to answer when it comes to postal banking because every country is different, and the reasons why you look at postal banking differs from country to country, whether it's a I won't go into it in great depth because I know there's going to be a huge amount of discussion about this over the next 2 days. I don't want to steal anybody's thunder on it. But to this point, I'm not aware of any correlation between postal banking and the willingness to engage with e-commerce. I will make one quick comment though, and that's been around Post offering prepaid debit cards. So if you're a person who is either unbanked or a person who has limited banking or very simple arrangements with your bank, you may choose to take on a debit card, which can be offered through the post office in association with a card player like MasterCard or Visa, etc., and load that card with cash, so you're not worried about credit issues, and then you can use that to shop online in a secure way without any undue financial risk as well. So that is one part where it's sort of pseudo banking, shall we say, but it has had an impact or a boost for e-commerce and use of the post.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Stephanie, and thank you for the answer, Ian. Next up, we have Steve DiMatteo.
Hey, I just want to thank all the panelists. Really great presentations. My question is directed at Ian. Ian, I'm sure you're familiar with the figures, but the Postal Service here was really feeling the crush of the holiday season this year. I think COVID certainly explains most of it, but millions of more people turned to the post to deliver gifts, to order things to their homes. Did other posts have a similar experience? And do you have any insight as to how they did with that? And I guess another question is, are other posts around the world expecting some of that additional shift to be sticky? Are they thinking more of the people that are shopping online and shipping through the mail? Do they expect them to be customers in the post for the long haul?
So last question first. Yes, most surveys seem to indicate that customers intend to keep shopping online. Some will shop at their existing pandemic levels, shall we say. Others might return to regular face-to-face bricks and mortar shopping, but supplement that with e-commerce shopping. So yes, there will be an enduring boost to parcels. With regard to coping with peak 2020, it was out of this world. But again, this is where different posts coped with it differently. I mean, if you look at, say, Australia. Australia Post has 80% of the B2C market. Now, its biggest week this past peak season, which actually was a week before the biggest peak in 2019. And that was because of the massive public awareness campaign saying, people, please do your ordering and your shopping early, because otherwise we might not be able to deliver the promise. Now, the other difference there is that to this point, many other posts around the world don't have Amazon dumping parcels on them at the last minute. I'm not going to criticize Amazon or say anything, give any more depth of analysis around that, but that is a factor that other posts don't have to deal with to the same extent as the US Postal Service. And this comes back to, again, though, to this idea of being the carrier of last resort. If you can be not the carrier of last resort, but the carrier of choice, you've got more control over those volumes and you're able to offer a better quality of service. I hope I've given you enough there without taking over the discussion too much.
Thank you. Thank you both. Next up, we have Nelson Betancourt with a question also for Ian. One moment, Nelson. We'll need you to unmute yourself there. I think we get the permission going.
Okay. Ian, I have a question for you. I've been thinking about community currencies. Is there a possibility that that the Postal Service could play a role in developing or be a developer for a community currency to help small businesses?
So I don't quite understand what you mean by community currency. Can you just give me a little bit more detail what that means?
Community currencies are generally currencies that are only used locally for local businesses. Right?
Right.
Yeah. And, in England, they're all over the world. I believe there's several thousand all over the world. But in England, they've developed them quite well. In the United States, they have several that are doing quite well. But my idea is that with all this business coming back to our local regions, if you will, the development of community currencies through the post office, being that that there's so much trust in the Postal Service. Have you looked at that? How would you look at that? Is there a possibility?
Well, it certainly is a possibility. And when it comes to governments, if a government wants something to happen, especially when it's spending money, it can make it happen. Now, there is a real need to stimulate local small businesses in the wake of the pandemic, because many of those local small businesses suffered because they weren't able to sell online and weren't set up for that. So there's an opportunity for the Post, by the way, as a side note there. So there is an opportunity there for the Post. With regards to like a local currency, I guess most of the examples I've seen of that have actually been tied to things like welfare payments. So, and that can work, but obviously there's a political debate around that and a social responsibility debate. But just the same, the Post can play a role there if it's going to we're talking about, say, preloaded cards. So you might have a debit card that's preloaded with currency, but you can only use in that community or for certain purposes. Now, there's a social debate around that and a political debate as well, but it can work. You just have to make sure you have a lot of consultation and make sure you understand what you're getting into. I think that's a short answer. What's really very long, could really be a long answer, if that makes sense, Nelson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
I think we've hit our questions. I'm going to give it a moment to see if there are any other outstanding questions. And if not, we will move on. And seeing no hands. Great. Well, thank you all. Before moving on, just another round of thanks to our fantastic panelists. Actually, a final question before we shift out. Maybe Judy or Monique or Sarah, if you could talk about sort of what some of the opposition is, what's standing in the way of some of the proposals you've laid out that we want to be able to move forward with now. Now that we're moving from the defensive stance, but now that we have a more proactive posture, what's in our way? What do we need to look out for? So Judy or Monique or Sarah.
So some of the things that are standing in the way are people, members of Congress. The Postal Service needs money to do some of these things, and if they could get the money that they need in infrastructure, or if they can get the money that they need through, any type of resolution, then they could get, more things done for the Postal Service. And if they took service standards very serious, because right now, if people can't get their medicine, if the mail is so slow, we're going to lose business. So we have to do everything we can to increase the service standards to give the people what they deserve.
I could say a couple more things about that. I mean, I think throughout the Postal Service history, when it has done these incredible innovations, there have been private, like self-interests that have tried to block them. And I've looked into the history of the introduction of the Parcel Post, and companies like Wells Fargo Express saw this as competition for them and tried to block it. Today, we couldn't imagine the country without the Postal Service delivering packages. So it was, Congress stood strong on that one and came through with it. Today, we're seeing the big banks trying to oppose postal banking or expansion of postal financial services because they see it as competition, even though they have neglected a lot of these communities for years and aren't providing services in a lot of low-income communities. And then again, what Judy said about the money, when the Postmaster General testified recently and said that he would only commit to 10% of the new vehicles for the Postal Service to be electric, he said it was because of money, and that if Congress came through with additional funding. And I think there's one where we need to look at the cost of not transforming the vehicle fleet, because the cost of climate change plus all of the the fuel and other costs associated with the fossil fuel vehicles that they have now is going to be much bigger than biting the bullet now and really transforming the fleet to be heavily electric.
Thanks, Sarah. Monique, did you have anything to add to Judy's and Sarah's comments?
No, I completely agree with both of them. I just wanted to say that also it's been our experience that the industries that feel threatened will go blazes against any suggestion, whether it's modest or large. So you might as well go large, because you're going to get the same reaction whether or not you're trying to tiptoe around them or, or really actually threaten their business interests. So, and this has been the case for many different similar initiatives.
Great advice there, Monique. Thank you. Yes, might as well go large, right?